The ducks went quiet before the water moved. Maribel noticed because ducks were never quiet. Not these
Something's
60
wrong.
mismatched birds with broken feathers, crooked feet, and voices loud enough to carry across the entire orchard. One moment, they were splashing between the drowned pear trees, pulling snails from the trunks, and stirring the black water with their orange feet. The
Thank you,
next,
Patch.
every sound stopped. Mara
What have you
stood
found?
knee-deep in the eastern
It has
row,
markings on
one
it.
hand wrapped around a wooden survey pole. Mud pressed cold through the split seam of her left boot. Mosquitoes whined around her ears. The water smelled of rotting leaves, rust, and something sour trapped beneath the soil. Patch, the limping brown hen, lifted her head first. She turned toward the northern reeds. Within seconds, nearly the entire flock followed. They began to swim, not in a loose cluster, but one behind another, tracing a path so narrow and straight it looked as though someone had drawn a line beneath the surface. Mara watched them pass the dead trees, the fallen branches, and the red county stake hammered beside the fence. Unsuitable for agriculture. That was what the report said. That was what everyone in town believed. But the ducks ignored the open water. They stayed on the invisible path, dipping their heads beneath the surface and pulling up pale roots, tiny snails, and pieces of gravel. Patch disappeared underwater longer than the others. When she surfaced, something gray hung from her bill. Mara waded closer and took it from her. It was not gravel. It was a flat piece of stone, its edge squared by human hands. A shallow groove had been carved across its surface. Mara pushed the survey pole into the mud where Patch had found it. 6 inches down, the pole struck something hard. She moved 3 feet forward and tried again. Another strike, then another. Whatever lay beneath the orchard continued in a perfectly straight line. A year later, some of the same people who had laughed when Mara paid $15 for the flooded property would stand outside her gate asking what she was willing to sell. But that morning, Mara knew only one thing. The ducks were not wandering through stagnant water. They were following something beneath it. 3 months earlier, Maribel had not owned a single tree. She had spent most of her life pruning orchards that belonged to other people, carrying ladders through rows her father knew better than the men whose names appeared on the deeds. He could tell which pear tree would split in winter by the angle of its lowest branch. He could smell fire blight before the blackened leaves appeared. He knew when a root system was thirsty, when a graft had failed, and when a tree everyone called dead still had 1 season left in it. But he had never owned the ground beneath any of them. When Mara was 12, the orchard where he had worked for almost 30 years was sold to a development company. The new owner gave the workers 5 days to leave the cottages along the southern fence. Her father packed his pruning tools into a wooden box and said only one thing as they drove away. "We knew every tree. We just never owned the soil under them." Mara carried those words into the county auction room nearly 20 years later. The flooded property appeared near the bottom of the list, between an abandoned storage lot and a strip of land too narrow to build on. 14 acres, 1 collapsing shed, 206 pear trees listed as dead or non-productive. The county assessor described it in a flat voice. Tax delinquent, seasonal inundation, drainage failure, unsuitable for cultivation. The opening bid was $10. No one moved. The $15 would not buy Mara a clean piece of land. The county was selling only its quitclaim interest. Whoever raised a hand would inherit the unpaid drainage assessments, the damaged structures, and every problem the previous owners had abandoned. That was why no one else wanted it. Mara sat in the last row, with $15 folded inside her coat pocket and her father's old grafting knife resting against her palm. $10, the auctioneer repeated. A man near the front turned around and saw her studying the photograph of the drowned trees. Cal Danner owned the largest commercial orchard in the county. He smiled as though he had already guessed what she was thinking. "Careful," he said. "The fish might demand rent." A few people laughed. Mara raised her hand. 15. The room went quiet for half a second. Then the laughter returned, louder this time. No one bid against her. By noon, Mara Bell held the county's deed to an orchard everyone else believed would cost more to abandon than to own. That afternoon, a county employee met her at the rusted gate. He handed over the paperwork, then drove a red wooden stake into the ground beside the entrance. Stamped across it in black letters were the words, "Unsuitable for agriculture." Mara stood alone after his truck disappeared. Beyond the fence, dark water filled the rows between the trees. Dead branches leaned over the surface like hands too tired to reach any farther. She touched the grafting knife through her coat. $15 had not bought her a working farm. It had bought her 14 flooded acres, years of neglected problems, and the first piece of ground no one could order her family to leave. Then, near the far eastern row, something moved against the still water. Not a fish, a branch, and at its tip, impossibly small and green, was a living bud. The green bud was smaller than Mara's thumbnail. From the gate, it had looked like a trick of light, a bright fleck against miles of gray bark and black water. But when she reached the eastern row, wading slowly between drowned roots and fallen limbs, it was still there, alive. The tree itself did not look alive. Its upper branches were bare. One side of the trunk had split years earlier, leaving a hollow dark enough to hold rainwater. Moss covered the north-facing bark, and a pale ring of fungus circled the base just above the floodline. The county report had marked it as tree number 187, dead, remove. Mara set her hand against the trunk. The bark was cold and rough beneath her palm. She unfolded her father's grafting knife. The hinge squeaked when she opened it. He had sharpened that blade every winter at the kitchen table, drawing it across a stone until the edge could peel bark without bruising the living tissue beneath. "Branches can lie," he used to say. "Check the cambium." Mara placed the blade against a narrow section of bark above the waterline and scraped gently. The first layer came away brown and dry. She scraped again. Beneath it was a thin ribbon of green. Not bright green, not healthy green, but living. Mara stopped breathing for a moment. She checked another section. Green again. The tree was damaged, starved of oxygen, and slowly drowning, but it was not dead. She looked back toward the red stake at the entrance. From this distance, she could no longer read the words, but she knew exactly what they said. The report had judged the branches. It had never looked beneath the bark. Mara spent the rest of the afternoon checking trees along the eastern row. Most were gone. Their inner wood was gray or brittle, and several trunks had already begun to rot from the center. But 7 still showed green. 7 out of 206. It was not enough to call the orchard healthy. It was enough to prove the report had stopped looking too soon. As the light faded, Mara knelt beside tree 187 and pushed her fingers into the mud around its roots. The water there felt colder than the water between the other rows. She moved her hand a few feet to the left, warmer, back toward the trunk, cold again. Then she heard it. At first she thought it was wind passing through the hollow branches, but the orchard was still. Mara lowered her head and pressed her ear against the wet bark. Somewhere below the roots, hidden beneath mud and standing water, came a faint, steady sound, water moving over stone. Mara could hear water moving beneath the orchard. She just could not afford to reach it. A pump large enough to drain even one section of the property cost more than she had earned in 6 months. Renting an excavator was out of the question. Even the smallest drainage crew wanted a deposit she could not pay. So Mara began with what she could afford. The ducks were advertised on a handwritten card pinned beside the register at the feed store. Mixed flock, farm closing, take all. There were 60 of them. Some were old, some were missing feathers. One drake had a twisted toe. A small brown hen walked with a permanent limp and refused to be separated from the flock. They were not breeding stock. They were not showbirds. Most farmers would have called them leftovers. Mara paid less for the entire flock than a mechanic had quoted to repair her truck. When Cal Danner saw the crates tied to the trailer, he leaned against the feed store door and laughed. $15 ducks for a $15 swamp. Mara tightened the rope across the last crate. "They eat snails," she said. "They also eat money." He walked away smiling. Mara released the birds near the old shed just before sunset. For the first few minutes, they stood together in a nervous, shifting mass. Then one stepped into the flooded row. Another followed. Within seconds, the orchard filled with splashing, wing beats, and loud, indignant quacking. For the first time since Mara bought the property, the place did not sound abandoned. The ducks worked constantly. They searched beneath floating leaves. They pulled snails from the trunks. They snapped at mosquito larvae near the surface and trampled young weeds along the shallow edges. Mara built a rough shelter from salvaged boards and stretched wire around the driest corner she could find. She collected 7 eggs the first week, 11 the next, then 19. It was not much, but it paid for feed. By the end of the second week, there were fewer snails clinging to the eastern trees. The water around the shelter smelled less sour. Small patches of mud began to appear where the birds had stirred away the thick mat of rotting leaves. The orchard was still flooded. The trees were still dying, but something had changed. Every morning, shortly after sunrise, the ducks stopped wandering and turned toward the eastern row. They crossed the open water in the same direction, passed tree 187, and disappeared behind a wall of reeds near the far boundary. At first, Mara assumed they were searching for shade. Then she noticed they returned with pale snails she had never seen anywhere else in the orchard. On the 9th morning, the flock vanished behind the reeds and did not come back. Mara waited 10 minutes, then 20. The orchard had gone strangely quiet. She picked up her father's grafting knife, stepped into the black water, and followed them. The reeds closed behind Mara like a curtain. Beyond them, the orchard narrowed into a strip of water between 2 rows of collapsed pear trees. The ground sloped so slightly that she would never have noticed it from the gate. The ducks had. They were gathered in a single line, stretching from tree 187 toward the northern boundary. They were not circling or feeding at random. Each bird followed the one ahead, dipping its bill beneath the surface at nearly the same place. Patch, the limping brown hen, disappeared under the water and surfaced with a pale snail clamped in her bill. Mara had not seen that kind near the shed. Its shell was almost white, with a thin red stripe spiraling around it. She stepped closer. The water around her left boot was warm from the morning sun. One pace forward, it turned noticeably colder. Mara stopped. She moved back. Warm. Forward again. Cold. A narrow ribbon of cooler water ran through the flooded row. She crouched and pushed her fingers beneath the surface. The mud along the ribbon was shallow and grainy. On either side, her hands sank nearly to the wrist in black silt. The smell was different too. Most of the orchard carried the heavy, sour odor of drowned leaves and stagnant soil. Here, the water smelled faintly of stone after rain. Mara returned the next morning with her father's old notebook, a length of string, and 6 wooden stakes. She marked the places where the ducks repeatedly dipped their heads. Then she measured the water temperature with a kitchen thermometer. The first point was 4 degrees colder than the flooded ground beside it. The second was 5. By the 4th point, the line was unmistakable. It passed beneath tree 187, cut between 2 rows of dead pears, and continued toward the reeds. Mara drove a stake into each location and tied the string between them. Straight, too straight to be natural. For 3 days, she followed the flock and extended the line. Every new stake revealed the same pattern: colder water, thinner mud, pale snails, and small pieces of gravel that looked nothing like the clay soil beneath the orchard. On the 4th afternoon, Mara plunged a shovel into the line near the northern fence. The blade struck stone. She cleared the mud with her hands. A flat gray slab appeared beneath the water. Its edge had been cut square. 6 feet farther on, she found another, then another. They had been placed there deliberately, by someone who had understood the orchard long before the county declared it worthless. Mara pulled the property survey from her coat and unfolded it against a tree trunk. The map showed the road, the shed, the fence lines, and the shallow drainage ditch outside the property. It showed nothing beneath the orchard. No channel. No stonework, no reason for cold water to cross the flooded rows in a perfect line. The ducks moved ahead without waiting for her. Mara followed until they reached a knot of reeds against the northern bank. Patch began stabbing her bill into the mud near an exposed root. Something metallic clicked beneath the water. Mara pushed the reeds aside and dug with both hands. Her fingers closed around a ring of rusted iron. It was attached to something buried under the mud. She pulled once. Nothing moved. She pulled again, harder. Beneath her knees came a hollow sound, not the dull thud of earth, the sound of empty space under stone. The iron ring did not lift a door. It lifted the orchard's skin. Mara wedged the shovel beneath the buried edge and leaned her weight onto the handle. Mud released with a wet sucking sound. The stone rose half an inch, then dropped back into place. She tried again. This time, Patch and the other ducks scattered as a dark ribbon of bubbles escaped around the slab. A smell rose from beneath it, cold mineral water, trapped roots, and the deep metallic scent of earth that had not touched air in years. Mara cleared more mud from the edges. The slab was wider than her shoulders and fitted over a narrow stone-lined opening. The iron ring had once served as a handle. Someone had built this. Not a ditch scraped through soil, but a channel made from flat stones set carefully along both sides, then covered to protect it from falling branches and silt. Mara pushed the shovel beneath the slab one final time. The stone tipped. Black water surged into the opening. For one breath, nothing happened. Then the orchard made a sound. A low, hollow rush moved beneath Mara's knees, followed by the unmistakable clatter of water running over stone. She froze. The sound traveled away from her, under the flooded rows, toward the shallow ditch beyond the northern fence. The water around her boots began to turn. Slowly at first. Leaves rotated in small circles. Threads of algae stretched toward the opening. A pale snail slid across the mud and disappeared into the current. Mara pressed her palm against the ground beside the channel. The soil trembled. She laughed before she could stop herself, a short, breathless sound that startled the ducks. The orchard was not sitting on dead swamp. It had a buried circulation system. For the next 2 days, Mara uncovered 3 more access stones along the line the ducks had shown her. Each opening released another pocket of trapped water. Each time, the sour surface shifted, and fresh ripples spread between the trees. Near tree 187, the water dropped nearly 2 inches. For the first time, Mara could see the swollen base of the trunk and part of the roots beneath it. She took her father's grafting knife from her pocket and laid it on the stone beside her. "You were right," she whispered, though she was not sure whether she meant her father, the tree, or the land itself. By sunset, the eastern row looked different. Mud ridges broke through the surface. The current carried rotting leaves toward the northern channel. The ducks followed the moving water, feeding more aggressively than before. Mara opened a 4th slab, then a 5th. The flow grew faster. She noticed a thin crack spreading through the mud around tree 187, but told herself the ground was only settling. Moving water meant drainage. Drainage meant air. Air meant roots could breathe. She kept working until darkness erased the fence line. Sometime after midnight, Mara woke inside the shed to a sound like a branch snapping under snow. Then came another, lower, heavier. From somewhere in the flooded orchard, roots were tearing beneath the ground. Mara reached tree 187 before sunrise. It was leaning toward the water, not much, only a few inches from where it had stood the night before. But the soil around its roots had split open in a dark crescent, and one of the larger roots was exposed above the mud like a broken bone. She stepped closer. The ground gave way beneath her boot. Mara caught the trunk with both hands, as though her weight could hold it upright. The bark pressed cold against her cheek. Somewhere below, water rushed through the channel she had opened too quickly. Another root snapped. The sound traveled through the trunk into her arms. "No," she whispered. She fetched rope from the shed and tied the tree to the nearest standing pear. Then she drove 2 posts into the ground and braced the lower trunk with salvaged boards. For an hour, the ropes held. Then the eastern bank collapsed. Water poured into the buried channel, carrying mud from beneath the root plate. Tree 187 tilted slowly, almost gently, until the ropes tightened, and one of the posts tore free. The tree fell across the flooded row. Its branches struck the water with a sound louder than Mara expected. The ducks scattered toward the reeds. Mara stood in the mud, staring at the green bud that had first brought her into the orchard. It now rested inches above the black surface. She had believed finding the channel meant she understood the land. She had mistaken movement for recovery. By mid-morning, Cal Danner's truck appeared at the gate. He did not enter. He stood beside the Red County stake and lifted his phone. "You draining it or drowning it twice?" he called. Mara said nothing. By noon, the video had reached half the county. The title read, "$15 Orchard Falls Apart." At the feed store, people replayed the moment the tree dropped. Someone joked that the ducks had found the quickest way to finish killing it. Mara did not go into town for 3 days. She closed 2 of the access stones and packed straw into the fastest section of the channel to slow the flow. The water steadied, but the damage had already been done. That evening, she sat inside the shed with her father's grafting knife on the table. Outside, the red stake was visible through the open door. Unsuitable for agriculture. For the first time, the words did not feel like an insult. They felt like a warning she had been arrogant enough to ignore. Mara looked toward the duck shelter. Selling the flock would cover part of what she owed for feed and fencing. Walking away now would still leave her with less debt than staying. She folded the knife shut. Then she heard a branch scrape against the shed wall. The fallen tree had shifted in the wind. Mara stepped outside and crossed the flooded row one final time. Most of tree 187 was lost. The trunk had split near the base, and several roots had torn completely free, but one upper branch was still green. Mara opened the knife. She cut 3 young shoots from the branch, each no longer than her hand. She wrapped them in a damp cloth and placed them carefully inside her coat. She could not save the tree, but perhaps she could save what was still alive inside it. As Mara turned back toward the shed, headlights appeared beyond the gate. An old woman stepped from a mud-covered truck and looked first at the fallen tree, then at the wrapped shoots in Mara's hands. "Did you open the drain?" she asked. "Or did you empty the orchard?" The old woman introduced herself as Ada Voss. "I saw the video," she said. Mara looked toward the road where Cal had filmed the fallen tree. Ada nodded at the exposed channel. "I recognize those square access stones. I helped clear that line when I was 19. For 37 years, Ada had maintained irrigation ditches, culverts, and drainage gates across the valley. Most of the old systems had disappeared from modern records long before she retired. She walked to tree 187 and crouched beside the exposed roots. "You opened 5 sections?" she asked. "In 2 days." Ada pressed 2 fingers into the torn bank. "You found part of the system," she said, then treated it like the whole system. "The orchard was drowning." "Yes, but drowning and being wet are not the same thing." She picked up a fallen branch and drew a straight line through the mud. "A drain carries excess water away." Then she drew a shallow curve across the slope. A ridge slows runoff before it reaches the trees. Finally, she marked several depressions farther downhill, and low basins hold enough moisture to keep the ground alive during dry months. Mara looked across the flooded rows. "Old orchards were rarely built to stay dry," Ada said. "They were built to stay balanced." The buried stone channel had never been intended to empty the entire property. It carried only the water the soil could not safely hold. Low ridges protected the root crowns, while shallow basins stored moisture away from the trunks. When years of silt and roots blocked the outlet, the orchard became a bowl. When Mara opened several covers at once, she pulled water and supporting soil out from beneath the trees too quickly. "I killed it," Mara said. "You made a mistake. It was alive before I touched it." Ada glanced at the damp cloth inside Mara's coat. "So are the shoots you saved." Mara unfolded the cloth. The 3 cuttings from tree 187 were still green. Ada led her toward a young rootstock near the edge of the eastern row. Its trunk was no thicker than Mara's wrist, but living cambium showed beneath a small scrape in the bark. Ada did not take the grafting knife. She pointed to the stem. "Cut above the bud. Make the surfaces clean. Match the living layers, not the outside bark." Mara's first cut went too deep. "Again," Ada said. Mara trimmed the damaged edge, shaped one of the shoots, and fitted it into a shallow notch in the rootstock. She wrapped the union with cloth tape and sealed it with wax. The graft looked impossibly fragile. Ada studied it and nodded. "Now you wait." Mara almost laughed. "Waiting is what ruined this place." "No, neglect ruined it. Waiting while watching is different." Ada looked toward the northern road. "There used to be a main outlet near that boundary, larger than the channel you opened. Do you know where?" "Not exactly." For the first time since arriving, Ada sounded uncertain. "But I may know where an old maintenance copy was stored." She returned the following morning, carrying a stained sheet of paper inside a plastic sleeve. It was not a complete map. One corner was missing, and several pencil marks had faded almost beyond recognition. Across the northern edge of the orchard, however, a second stone channel had been drawn in blue. Ada tapped the line. This copy came from an old valley maintenance ledger. "The outlet should begin inside your western boundary, then pass beneath the county road." Mara traced the faded channel with one finger. To inspect the section beneath the road, she would need county approval. The radio inside Ada's truck crackled with a weather warning. A slow-moving storm was forming over the northern hills. 2 mornings later, Mara carried the sketch, her photographs, and her measurements into the county office. The clerk compared Ada's drawing with the modern drainage map. On the new map, the channel did not exist. The clerk turned the old sketch sideways, then held it beneath the fluorescent light. "There's no registered channel here," he said. Mara placed her photographs on the counter. Flat stones, iron rings, the exposed section beneath the orchard. "It's there. I'm not saying you didn't find something. You're looking at it." He glanced toward the office behind him, where a wall-sized drainage map showed blue lines crossing farms, roads, and culverts throughout the valley. None of them entered Mara's orchard. "We can only act on what is documented," he said. Mara unfolded Ada's sketch and laid it beside the modern map. The faded blue pencil line ran beneath the county road and toward a culvert half buried in brush. "This was documented, not in the current system. The current system says my orchard has no drain." The clerk looked tired rather than angry. "That somehow made it worse. If you disturb anything beneath county property without approval, you'll be liable for road damage, flooding, and downstream loss. How long does approval take? Survey, engineering review, environmental inspection. How long?" He hesitated. "Several months." Mara stared at him. A storm was expected in 5 days. The weather service was predicting 3 inches of rain, perhaps more if the front stalled over the valley. Tree 187 had fallen after less than half that. The clerk slid the photographs back toward her. "I'm sorry." Mara gathered the papers slowly. Her father had spent 30 years knowing every weakness in another man's orchard. Yet when the land changed hands, none of that knowledge mattered, because his name was not on the deed. Now Mara owned the land. Still, what she knew seemed to matter less than what the map failed to show. Outside the office, rain had begun tapping against the courthouse steps. Ada was waiting beside her truck. "They said no," Mara told her. "They said the map was final," Ada replied. Mara looked toward the dark clouds gathering above the northern hills. "Is it?" Ada opened the truck door. "Paper is final until water disagrees." Mara did not touch the county culvert. Instead, she returned to the orchard and began rebuilding the system one small section at a time. She closed 2 access stones entirely and narrowed the others with flat rock. She packed the eroded banks with willow branches and straw. She reshaped the collapsed soil into low ridges that slowed runoff instead of forcing it straight toward the drain. Along the highest strips of exposed ground, she scattered rye and clover seed. Then she divided the orchard with temporary fencing and moved the ducks through one section at a time, keeping them from churning the same mud into liquid. For 4 days, Mara worked from first light until darkness. She marked the water level on each tree trunk with chalk. She checked the graft from tree 187 every morning. Still green. By the evening before the storm, the orchard looked less like a flooded field and more like a system waiting to be tested. The stone channels moved water slowly. The earthen ridges held. The ducks fed quietly between the eastern rows. Mara allowed herself to believe it might be enough. Then, just before sunset, Patch lifted her head. One by one, The other ducks stopped feeding. They did not turn toward the channel Mara had restored. They turned west. The entire flock crossed the orchard and gathered beside a mound of roots near the county road, a place with warmer water, deeper mud, and no stones visible beneath the surface. Patch dove once, then again. On the third dive, she surfaced with a strip of rotted wood in her bill. Beneath the flock, the water began to pulse. The water did not ripple. It pulsed, a slow rise beneath the ducks, followed by a hollow drop as though something below the mud were breathing against a blocked throat. Patch turned first. Within seconds, most of the flock had crowded around the mound of roots near the western boundary. Patch dove and vanished beneath the brown surface. When she came up, a strip of blackened wood hung from her bill. Its edge was square, not a fallen branch, a board. Mara pushed the survey pole into the mud beside the place where Patch had surfaced. It sank 2 feet, then struck something solid. She moved 6 inches toward the road, solid again. The line pointed toward the county culvert, but the blockage itself lay 12 feet inside Mara's fence, before the channel passed beneath the road. She could clear what was on her land without touching county property. Rain began before she reached the shed. Not heavy yet, a cold scattering across the water, each drop opening a silver circle that vanished into the next. Mara returned with a shovel, rope, lantern, and Ada's old sketch sealed beneath her coat. Ada arrived 20 minutes later, headlights cutting through the reeds. "You called about the ducks," she said. Mara pointed toward the pulsing water. Ada watched it rise and fall twice. "That is not standing water." They began digging by hand because the roots were too dense for a full shovel stroke. Mara cut away dead fibers while Ada removed mud with a narrow trenching spade. The rain strengthened, filling the split seam of Mara's boot and running cold down her sleeves. Beneath the roots lay a collapsed timber frame. Below that was stone. The opening was wider than the eastern channel, nearly 3 feet across, built like a covered throat beneath the orchard. "The main outlet," Ada said. "It should have carried excess water toward the culvert beneath the road. Instead, it was packed solid. Roots had forced their way through the joints. Decades of leaves had compressed into black pulp. Rusted wire, broken glass, and 2 crushed fuel cans were wedged between the stones. A fence post had been driven into the opening years earlier, either to mark it or to block it. Mara wrapped the rope around the post. Ada caught her wrist. Not all at once. Thunder rolled across the valley. Months earlier, Mara would have pulled until something broke. Now she cut the smaller roots first, removed the loose leaves, opened a gap no wider than 2 fingers. Then she waited. A thin stream escaped. Mara checked the chalk mark on the nearest tree. The water dropped less than a 1/4 inch. She widened the opening and waited again. The current strengthened. The bank held. For the next 2 hours, she repeated the same rhythm. Clear, watch, measure, stop. The storm arrived fully after dark. Rain hammered the bare branches. Water poured from the road and filled the shallow ridges Mara had rebuilt. The swales slowed it. The eastern channel carried part of it north. But the flooded rows continued to rise. At the main outlet, the fence post remained wedged beneath the largest stone. Mara braced both boots in the mud and pulled the rope. The post shifted an inch. A dark surge pressed through the gap. Ada lifted the lantern. Again, slowly, Mara pulled. The post came free. For one violent second, mud and water burst from the opening. Mara fell backward, expecting the bank to collapse as it had around tree 187. But the willow bracing held. The channel did not roar. It drew. Water folded into the stone opening in a broad, steady current. Leaves turned. Foam stretched into pale lines. The pulsing beneath the ducks disappeared. Mara checked the chalk mark. Then she waited. 10 minutes later, the water had fallen half an inch. After 30 minutes, a full inch. By dawn, the orchard began to reappear. First came the tops of the earthen ridges, then the stones between the rows, then narrow strips of dark soil that had not seen daylight in years. The ducks approached cautiously. Patch placed one orange foot on the exposed ground, then the other. For the first time since Mara brought them to the orchard, the flock walked between the pear trees instead of swimming. Mara stood in the rain and laughed. The land was not dry, the orchard was not yet saved, but the water was finally moving where it had once been taught to go. As the level continued to fall, mud peeled away from dozens of buried trunks. Mara knelt beside the first and scraped the bark with her father's knife. Green. She moved to the next, green again. By sunrise, more than 100 old rootstocks stood exposed beneath the dead orchard, and on the graft taken from tree 187, one swollen bud had begun to open. The orchard did not recover all at once. For the first week, the greatest change was the smell. The sour odor that had clung to the eastern rows began to fade. The mud still held water, but it no longer released bubbles when Mara stepped on it. Beneath the surface, air was returning to the roots. Then the shoots appeared. Small red points pushed from the exposed rootstocks, first along the western row, then near the old shed, then beneath trees the county had marked dead years earlier. Mara counted 17. 2 days later, there were 43. By the end of the month, she stopped counting. She cut away dead wood, protected the living shoots, and grafted pear varieties onto the strongest rootstocks. Every cut was made with her father's knife. Every graft was wrapped by hand. The ducks worked through the rows behind her. They ate snails from the trunks, searched for larvae in the softened soil, and trampled young weeds before they could take hold. Mara moved them section by section, never leaving them long enough to turn the ground back into mud. The orchard was still scarred. Several trees never recovered. One section remained too wet to plant. Another had lost so much soil that Mara converted it into a shallow holding basin instead of fighting it. She was learning that saving land did not mean forcing every acre to behave the same way. It meant listening long enough to learn what each part could become. The graft from tree 187 remained the most fragile. For weeks, the bud stayed closed. Mara checked it every morning, pressing one finger lightly against the wrapped union, searching for softness, rot, or any sign the living layers had failed to join. Nothing changed. Then, one cold morning in early spring, she found the wax split by a line of green. A leaf unfolded. Mara stood beside it for a long time. By May, the shoot had grown nearly a foot. By June, 3 pale blossoms opened along its stem. The first flower in the restored orchard had come from the tree she had killed. Mara did not take a photograph. She simply rested her hand against the young trunk and whispered, "You stayed." The visible proof came slowly after that. The water remained below the root crowns after heavy rain. The swales filled, then emptied without tearing the soil away. The stone channels carried only the excess. Rye and clover held the exposed ground together. Earthworms appeared beneath the mulch. The western basin attracted frogs, dragonflies, and wild ducks that had never visited when the water was stagnant. Mara sold eggs at the feed store, then rooted cuttings, then grafted saplings grown from the surviving stalk beneath the orchard. The first pear harvest fit into 6 wooden crates. It was not enough to make her rich. It was enough to make the land pay for itself. That autumn, a university extension specialist walked the property with Ada. He tested the soil, inspected the channels, and studied the surviving root systems. These trees were never dead below ground, he told Mara. The drainage failure hid what was still viable. The county updated its records. The red stake remained. Mara left it where it was. 3 weeks later, Cal Danner arrived at the gate. He no longer laughed. He walked slowly along the fence, looking at the young grafts, the cleared rows, and the ducks moving through the clover. "I heard you're selling trees," he said. "A few." He nodded toward the orchard. "I might be interested in buying more than trees." Mara said nothing. Cal named a price. It was more money than Mara had ever seen written beside her name. For a moment, she thought of the auction room. The laughter, the $15 folded inside her coat. Then she looked past him toward the graft from tree 187. 3 small pears now hung beneath the branch that had once lain inches above black water. "The orchard isn't for sale," she said. Cal removed his cap. After a pause, He asked whether he could see the drainage system. Mara opened the gate. "You can," she said, "but clean the mud from your boots before you step into the grafting rows." He looked down. Then, without arguing, the man who had once laughed at her scraped his boots clean and waited for permission to enter. The first pear ripened in late August. It hung from the graft taken from tree 187, small and uneven, its skin marked by a russet scar along one side. Mara left it on the branch for 3 extra days, not because it needed more time, because she did. On the 4th morning, she walked into the eastern row with her father's grafting knife in her pocket. The orchard was quiet except for insects in the clover and the soft clicking of duckbills against damp soil. Water moved beneath the stone channels, steady and nearly invisible. At the gate, the red county stake still stood where it had been driven into the ground, unsuitable for agriculture. The paint had faded, the words had not. Mara had been asked more than once why she did not pull it out. She never gave the same answer twice. Sometimes she said it marked the entrance. Sometimes she said it kept people from becoming too confident in reports. The truth was simpler. The stake reminded her that a judgment could be accurate about a moment and still be wrong about what was possible. Mara stopped beneath the young graft and opened the knife. The hinge gave the same quiet squeak it had made the day she first scraped bark from tree 187. She lifted the pear in one hand and cut the stem cleanly. For a moment, she held it without moving. Her father had spent his life caring for trees rooted in somebody else's ground. He had known when they were thirsty, when they were sick, and when they were not finished. But he had never been allowed to decide what happened to them. Mara looked across the orchard. The land was still imperfect. One corner remained wet enough for frogs instead of pears. Several old trunks stood hollow and silver. Some channels needed repair after every hard storm, but the orchard belonged to no report now. It belonged to the work, to the roots that had survived, to the water moving where it had once been taught to go, and to the woman who had learned that saving land did not mean defeating it. The ducks had not performed a miracle. They had followed cooler water, living insects, and the faint current beneath the mud. Mara had been the one who noticed. What lay beneath the flood was not treasure in the way people like to imagine treasure. It was stonework, rootstock, memory. A system forgotten because no one had looked closely enough to see it was still trying to function. They had laughed because she paid $15 for a flooded orchard. What they never understood was that she had not bought dead land. She had bought a living system with one blocked artery and 60 unwanted ducks that knew where to listen.